Basically, ever since I've had any sort of presence in the online gaming community, there was one franchise that kept getting recommended to me all the time. That franchise being the Xenoblade Chronicles series. At first, I would just see it pop up every now and then in discussions about must-play Nintendo Switch games, or just in general JRPG discussions, but over time, as the franchise expanded with a remaster of the first entry or with Xenoblade 2 characters being added to Smash, I would hear about it more and more. At the peak of its excitement, nobody would shut up about it, and literally everywhere I went, people would tell me to check this series out. Especially the first one, since apparently it was one of the best games of all time. I was pretty late to the party though, since I only bought a Nintendo Switch in late 2020, and even if I bought my Switch together with a copy of Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, it would not be until late 2022 that I would check the game out. You know how it is, sometimes games just kinda get lost in the backlog, and while I was excited to play it, other games just kinda took priority. But that is until Xenoblade 3 got announced, which kinda rekindled that excitement, enough to make me finally play the game. And I have a lot of thoughts on this game. Some negative, some positive, some are somewhere in the middle. But in general, while I really wanted to love this game, I didn't really have the best time with it. Or as it says in the title or in the thumbnail, the best way to describe my feelings of this game would probably just be disappointment. But I would really appreciate it if you could stick around for the video, even if you absolutely love this game, because while I ultimately didn't like the game as much as everyone else seems to like it, it's not really a simple matter of liking or disliking the game. I'm actually pretty conflicted on it, which is why I've really been wanting to make this video for a really long time. I even talked about it a year ago in my 2022 backlog video, and I want to make this video not just to shit on the game, but to explain why I feel the way that I do. Because everywhere I go, I see this game being praised as one of the best, and I'm just kinda here to bring my opinion into the mix. But as always with these types of videos, I'm not trying to convince you of anything, I'm not trying to tell you that the game is actually bad or anything like that. This is a very opinionated and personal video. You're free to like the game, you're free to love the game. It just didn't connect with me, and I wanna talk about why. I just thought I'd mention that, since nowadays gaming discussions can get pretty wild, and people tend to take these things as facts rather as opinions, which is not the goal of this video. So if you're interested in hearing my opinion, why not stick around? The story section will be the main focus of this video. I'm gonna go over the events in order, talking about what I either liked or disliked about said event, but I'm not gonna be talking about every single scene or moment or event, of course, just the ones that I have something to say about, since this video will already be long enough with just that. This section will also be about the characters and just everything that isn't the gameplay. The gameplay side of things will then of course cover my thoughts on everything else, like the combat, open world, exploration, mission structure, etc. And then lastly, I will also be talking about Future Connected for a little bit. And this video will also be part 1 of a series of videos on my channel. In the end, my goal is to have a video on every single Xenoblade game, or at least 1, 2, 3, and all of their extra stories and DLCs like Future Connected, Torna, and Future Redeemed. This will probably be a very long process. The games are pretty long, writing the script, recording, editing, it's all gonna take a while. But in the end, I just really wanna have my journey with this franchise documented on my channel. And you might be thinking, well, if you didn't like the first game, why even bother with 2 and 3? But the thing is, while the first game disappointed me, I saw something here, especially after playing Future Connected. A lot of things that bothered me were already improved upon, so I really hope that by the end of the series, my videos can show the journey of how I learned to love this franchise. Who knows, maybe in a few years I'll even look back at Xenoblade 1 and I'll be able to appreciate it more than I do now. But there's only one way to find that out. So let's finally get started by talking about the game itself. Kicking things off with the story. The story has a lot of ups and downs for me. I'll go into detail in a second, but I think that the game has a really strong start, only to then take a massive dive in quality. There is a good chunk of the game that I genuinely just didn't enjoy, but after that massive dive, it does introduce some cool things, some cool subplots, and it slowly but surely reaches an honestly incredible ending. But because it did take that massive dive at the start, it was really hard for the game to kind of climb up again. Because while the beginning was very good and it did grab my attention, it's not like I was fully and completely hooked on it. So when the game started losing me afterwards, it was a bit harder to get reinvested again. But thankfully, by the end of it, it did manage to reel me back in, because I really love the conclusion of this game. But let's go in order now. As I said in the intro, I'm not gonna go scene by scene. This isn't a full breakdown of the story or anything like that. I'm just gonna talk about my thoughts and experience chronologically, going into more details where I think that's necessary. So to start off, I really liked the opening. And I'm not just talking about chapter 1, but the prologue as well. The Mechon and the Bionis fighting in this empty world, paired with the narration, just looks really cool, and it also instantly gives us a glimpse at the scale of this game. Same thing with the following scene of the battlefield. It does a good job at just setting up some general stuff, and this strong start continues in chapter 1. I'm a really big fan of character-driven stories, so while there isn't that much going on in this chapter main story-wise, we do get some nice scenes introducing us to everyone. We just get to see all of them chill and hang out, so I was honestly having a pretty good time. The game was just giving us a nice foundation for all of the main characters. It's not like I was instantly insanely attached to them or anything like that, but I could see myself caring for them in the future if the game kept this up. Shulk being the tech nerd, Ryan being the classic idiot best friend that also wants to protect everyone, and then you have Fiora, who's a really caring friend, but she's also no pushover either. The only character that I didn't really like at this point was probably Dunban. The game is just really trying to make him look like the coolest guy ever, but I don't know, I feel like they tried a bit too hard, and I didn't really find anything in him to care about, at least in the early game. Especially since the game is portraying him as the experienced mentor type character, but he's not making the wisest decisions at all. Later in the game he does get some very good scenes that made me like him more, but right now in early game I just didn't like him. But besides Dunban, I do like how all the other characters were handled. For example, the scene of Fiora and Shulk looking over the city was really nice, giving us a glimpse at their relationship and that there might be something more than friendship here. But that scene was also where we got this line.
It's so peaceful. You know, Shulk, I hope every day can be like this, always.
AKA a massive death flag. So I knew that something was gonna happen to her sooner or later. I just think that it's a bit sad that the something happened as soon as it did. Because basically right after you're introduced to everyone and you get a sense of their relationships and who everyone is, the very next thing that happens is a trip to the Tefra cave, and on the way back the Mechon attack already happens. Now, of course, there were some other scenes like some Monado exposition and some pretty good foreshadowing in the form of Shulk's visions, but character-wise there isn't that much here besides for a very basic foundation. And because of that, when Fiora ended up dying, it didn't leave that much of an impact on me, even if the whole attack on the village sequence was done really well. It had some cool action moments, but it also had some really nice character interactions sprinkled throughout. But again, when she died, I can't say that it left that big of an impact on me, or that I even cared that much. Don't get me wrong, I cared a little bit, she was definitely my favorite character at this point in the game, but when she died I was more like, oh, okay, I would have liked to see a bit more from her, but I guess that's how it is. I just don't think we got enough time to actually get attached to the characters. But at the time, I didn't really see that as a problem, as this is more of a criticism looking back at the game. Because from here on out, getting revenge for Fiora becomes the main goal of her party. I get that they didn't want the game to have too much of a slow start, so starting the game off with the attack and immediately setting us out on a journey to get revenge could be pretty good, if you give me more reasons to care about this relationship throughout the story, in the way of flashbacks for example, to build it further. I didn't really care about her, Ryan, Shulk or Dunban, but they could still make me care. Make me care about the characters on this quest, so I'm not on this quest because Shulk wants revenge, but because I want revenge. Or at least because I really care about Shulk, so I want him to get his revenge. But that's really what the game ultimately fails to do for me. And because of this, I barely cared about the main goal of the game for a good 20 to 25 hours, I'd say, and I'm pretty sure that I beat the game at around the 50-hour mark. So that's half of the game that I did not care at all about the main plot. This could have easily been improved by just having some more character moments while they're on the journey, or by adding some more flashbacks. Like, why not have a flashback every now and then to Colony 9, showing our trio hanging out together? It's especially weird because they do have flashbacks, but we just get the same one over and over again. Every single time that we get a flashback from Shulk thinking about Fiora, it's the same scene of them on that bench. Like, I get it, it's a really good scene, but do they not have any other good memories together? Just showing us more from them would have already gotten me a lot more invested in their journey. But it's not that I didn't care about anything. There were some interesting plot points here and there, but those are mostly just subplots that were introduced when a new character would show up. And those are then of course still subplots, and they take a while to come into the forefront. It's more of a setup for what will happen after the revenge, because the revenge does stay a main focus of the game for a good 20 hours, which is again a pretty long section in which the game just completely lost me. And once a game completely loses the interest of a player, it's a lot harder to get that player invested again, compared to just getting them invested from the start. Which is why I went into quite a bit of detail about the opening chapters. They were good, but they just served as a foundation. A foundation that they, in my opinion, failed to build on until the later half of the game. I just feel like there aren't enough scenes that focus on our main characters after chapter 2 until I would say chapter 8 when they arrive at the Imperial capital. I'm not saying that we need another chapter with nothing happening outside of character building, but the later half of the game does a fantastic job at inserting character moments throughout the main story moments, and to have it all interweaved together. Like, in the later half of the game, there are a lot of moments where the main story is progressing, but then there would just be a scene of the characters having a little downtime and just talking to each other, which is an element that's largely just absent in the first half of the game. Most of the scenes between our main characters are literally just there for exposition, be it this talk between Shulk and Ryan or the talk between Shulk and Dixon later on. They're literally just spouting exposition for the player, and it's not very natural either. While these scenes could have easily been used to give them and their relationship a bit more depth, it's just weird because they're mostly just traveling through the Bionis in these chapters. It would be the perfect moment for a slower character scene where they reflect on what's been happening or where they've just been, how they've been holding up. But instead, we run into Juju, and we start the Colony 6 arc. And I'm sorry, but the entirety of the Colony 6 arc feels like a massive sidetrack to me. Like, yeah, some important things do happen here, like Sharla gets introduced and she just joined the party, but she's the least interesting of all of the characters. I can easily count the Sharla moments that I like on one hand, and this is a 50+ hour game. She's the first party member to join after our initial 2 characters. Besides that, the arc does show some more of Shulk's visions and the fact that they're not set in stone, like the future can still be changed and be influenced, but they already showed this right before this arc in the Spider Cave with Ryan. I guess the arc also serves to give them some more allies on Bionis and to show that Colony 9 isn't the only one that got attacked, which is good in theory, but playing through this chapter, it just really drags. Like, yeah, the world building is fine, we get introduced to a new character, but playing through it just wasn't fun. And in part, it's also because, as I've been saying, I needed more time or interactions to connect to our main duo. I really wanted them to give them some more depth. But here, during this entire arc, the spotlight is just on the Colony 6 cast. But it also drags because during this arc, we've also been getting a lot of visions to set up the next arc, so to say. We've been getting visions of Prison Island and of Melia, my beloved, which looks so much more interesting than whatever is going on in Colony 6. And it's kinda just what you want to get to. I already had this feeling on my first playthrough, but now looking back at the cutscenes for this video, it's so much worse. But afterwards, we do finally get on our way to Prison Island. And on the way there, we have one small moment which I really liked, and I kind of want to highlight it because of that. It's nothing special, but there's this one small scene between Dunban and Shulk. It's just a few lines long, but it has no exposition, no nothing, just a really nice moment of two characters talking, giving their relationship and what they're doing a lot more depth, which is exactly what I wanted more of. And to keep the positivity going, here we also get introduced to the best part of the whole game. The best character, my favorite character. She finally gets introduced, she's here. It's Melia, and the reason why I like her so much is that she gets the most characterization and screen time out of all the party members by far, and the game really goes out of its way to achieve that. I'd even go as far as to say that she's kinda treated like a second protagonist. So considering all that, plus just the fact that she's a really likable character, she's the character archetype that I just really like in general, so I might be a bit biased, but it's no surprise that she easily became my favorite character of this game, and probably one of the most memorable parts of it as well. And the game already puts her in the spotlight with her introduction, because it's pretty different compared to how the other characters have been introduced so far. It's not just the party running into her on their journey. The game cuts away from the main cast to show what she's been doing and why she's here in the first place. The details of why she's here is kept vague for now, but I think it's really cool that she gets her own introduction before the gang meets her. Her presence was also being felt throughout the whole game so far, thanks to Shulk's visions, so you're immediately interested in what's going on here. Or at least I was, because the visions were like the only interesting thing happening until now. But just giving Melia more screen time or giving her her own introduction isn't all. There are sections later on where she separates from the main group, but the game actually follows her POV. You follow her and you play as her for those sections. You even hear her inner thoughts and her inner monologues at those points, which gives us so much of her character. We know what she's thinking, we know how she's feeling about the situation that she's in. We know about her struggles and her responsibilities, which is so much more than we get for any of the other party members. We even get this in other scenes as well, where she's not alone. Like here, where she's joined up together with everyone and they're fighting at Telethia. Yeah, the game shows us Shulk's POV and we're playing as Shulk, but you still hear her inner monologues, which is just really cool because we go on that quest to help her. So it's really interesting that we can see her thoughts on this whole situation. I am getting a little ahead of myself though when talking about the Telethia scene. I guess I just got carried away for a bit talking about Melia, but dialing it back a little bit, we actually meet another character that I really like, being Alvis. He gets introduced basically right after we meet Melia, and I really like him since the beginning already, since he's a very mysterious character, but he's also really entertaining to watch. His introduction, for example, is super exposition heavy, but it's still entertaining since he's a very smug character and he brings it in a way that's pretty fun. He knows so much more than everyone else, but he just hints at stuff and he's having fun with it. I, in general, just really like characters like that, so even if we didn't see a lot of him here, and even though we don't get that much on him, I already thought that he was very intriguing and especially entertaining from the beginning. So while Melia took my interest from the beginning and grew to become my favorite character over the course of the game, that was more of a progression as I saw more from her. While I already really liked Alvis ever since his first scene, and his introduction is actually one of my favorite moments in the game. And the introductions aren't done yet either, because we also get this little guy a few hours later. And I honestly don't have any really strong feelings about Ricky. He's just kinda there being a funny little guy. He's entertaining half of the time, and the other half he's a bit annoying. He does have a good moment or two later on that shows another side of him, but Ricky is Ricky. I don't hate him, I don't love him. He's alright, he's pretty entertaining. The main thing that I liked in these few chapters here though were definitely these introductions, because when they have these character introductions, they're also kind of forced to have interactions with the rest of the gang, which shows a bit more of Ryan's and Shulk's and Dunban's personality, which hasn't been shown that much so far. It's definitely a step up from the Colony 6 chapters, but I don't think it's as good as the opening chapters. It's just the introductions of the characters and their subplots that make for nice moments here throughout the main plot that I still didn't really care about at this point. But now that we've been introduced to all of these characters and we went on the little Melia quest that I mentioned earlier about Delphia, Ricky officially joins our party and we enter the capital as Melia is guiding us there. And this is where the more interesting subplots that just got introduced are slowly starting to take a bit more of a front stage. Sadly though, this is also where we start getting sidetracked and the pacing is a bit weird from this point onwards. These sidetracks aren't sidetracks in the way that Colony 6 felt like one, but they're smaller sections that are here just to stretch out the game, it feels like. Like when we first enter the capital, the characters are waiting in their cell or their guest room, I guess, until a guard comes in. He then tells our party about a random SOS signal and off we go on a random quest that has nothing to do with the main plot. It's basically a side quest that's placed in the middle of not only the main story, but in the middle of a sequence of really important cutscenes. Since during this quest we keep switching perspective to the capital where we see a cutscene of Alvis's discussion with the Emperor. They're talking about a prophecy and Shulk's arrival and Melia's succession to the throne. We also see the grudge that Yumeya holds against Melia, and we see Melia's reaction to all of this, because she's not with the main party at this point. And that is honestly a really good scene, followed by another great scene of the ceremony. But what the fuck was the point of having this SOS side quest in between all of this? Why not let the scenes flow into each other? While I was playing the game, it was really annoying to try and get invested in this sequence of events, only for the game to switch back to Shulk and his random squadron that he's saving. It felt like the game was kinda just trying to keep me busy, and it really took me out of it. When I was re-watching the cutscenes for this video, everything flowed together so much nicer, and I could really appreciate these scenes more because I was just watching them back to back without being interrupted by the gameplay. So while I really did like these scenes, the pacing really fucked with my enjoyment of this section. At least it was followed up by a really nice and linear section of Melia's trial, and after that Prison Island, which is where the revenge plot basically reaches its conclusion and the game can start focusing on the good parts. The entire Prison Island section is honestly just really good. We finally get to see a lot of elements come together that have been building up for a while. The Monado awakening, Sansa and the Emperor's death, which again plays into Melia. This is a scene that's been getting a lot of build up, and it's also right after Melia's trial. I know that I'm talking about Melia a lot compared to the rest of the cast, but I think that it's genuinely insane how much the game focuses on her. From her introduction to her quest to kill the Delphia, to her succession plotline, her relationship with her father, the betrayal of her aunt, her special trial, and now this. And this is not a bad thing, by the way. I absolutely love her and it's great for her character. But she's also been here for like 2, maybe 3 chapters, and she has so much going on already. Her character has so much depth, a lot more than Ryan, Charlotte, Dunban, and Ricky combined. At this point, I'd even say that she has more than Shulk, but his time will definitely come. I might not be talking about Shulk a lot for now, but that will definitely change later on as we get further into the story and when he gets his bigger focus. This is also where it gets revealed that Fiora is still alive. I wasn't really surprised by this though, since throughout the game, in between chapters, the game would often cut away to show this mysterious girl in the Mekon. And I had 2 theories about this while playing. Either it was gonna be one of the main villains, if not the main villain, or it was gonna be Fiora, if not a combination of both. But I like that she came back though, and I also really like the way that it was done. She looks a bit different, she has no reaction to seeing Shulk or Dunban. It's kinda like, yeah, that is Fiora, but is that really her? What happened to her? How did she get in this situation? And it got me really interested in what happened to her. So yeah, Prison Island's genuinely a fantastic section. It had good action, it had good lore, and it had very good character moments interweaved between all of this. Basically all the things that I liked about the first few chapters were finally back. And this was chapter 9 out of 17. We're a bit over halfway, and while the game still has some ups and downs coming up, from here on out I would say that there were more sections of the game that I actually enjoyed compared to sections of the game that I didn't. Since the revenge quest is over now and we're actually focusing on more interesting things. But as I said in the beginning, the game did lose me for a pretty big portion, so So while now, in retrospect, I can say that, yeah, from here on out, the game is steadily getting better in quality, while playing, it definitely took the game some effort to get me invested again into everything, even if I liked most of the things that were happening. First, we get to see the aftermath of Prison Island, which I again really like. A big event just happened, so it's nice to just see the characters reflect on it. I especially like this scene of Dunban and Shulk, for example. It definitely made me warm up to Dunban as a character. He has some good things to say here, and then I was like, okay, I'm kinda starting to like Dunban now. Later on, Melia also officially joins the party, and we get some more scenes with her, showing us the feelings that she has for Shulk and showing her thoughts on joining the crew. We actually get quite a few Melia scenes here. Her joining is a really big event, and just like Melia herself, these scenes are very based. Even Sharla does something here, for the first time, I would argue. She basically just encourages Melia and acknowledges her feelings and everything, and yeah, if Sharla was gonna do anything, encouraging Melia does give her plus points in my book, so I'll give her that. But sections like these are definitely starting to happen more often from now on, like later on when we have the scenes on the beach or the factory. But that's for when we enter the Mechonas. From now until then, there are still a few more chapters, but I don't have that much to say about them. In general, I guess they were just pretty alright. There were some parts here and there that there's just not that much story going on, and you're just kinda going from point A to B. These chapters are just not that story heavy. While playing through it, it was pretty boring for this reason, but rewatching the cutscenes now for the video and having every story moment flow into each other made me enjoy this part of the game a lot more. But I'll get further into that specific point when I talk about the gameplay, since stuff like that isn't really the story's fault, I would say. But that's also not to say that there wasn't a single important moment in this stretch of chapters. There just wasn't anything to stand out, besides for maybe the showdown between Mumkar, Dunban and Shulk, leading into his boss fight. There's nothing specific in that scene that I want to highlight, but it was a cool scene, so I didn't just want to skip over it. And this then also leads up to the fortress, where we get another pretty good section, being the face-off between Egil and the rest of the characters. But my favorite part or element from these scenes was definitely the Fiora stuff. Even if we're already a few chapters further, last time we saw Fiora was of course during Prison Island, so she is still clouded in mystery, and here we finally get some hints towards what's going on with her. It's not straight up explaining what happened, but we do start seeing some more glimpses of what exactly is at play here, which is pretty interesting, and I like how they're hinting at it now in a cryptic way before actually just explaining it. She is still friendly towards us though, and she definitely knows who we are. And because of this, she saves us from Egil, joins the party, but in the process of escaping, we all end up falling down the Bionis, and we land on the beach at the bottom of Mechonas, and all of our characters are split up for now. Chapter-wise, this is chapter 13 out of 17, so we're definitely in the final stretch, and in these few chapters coming up, we get a lot of good stuff, with a lot of lore and world building, and we're also getting a lot more character interactions and character moments. As I said earlier, I feel like the characters slowly started getting a bigger focus once we reached the capital, with the cell and the Prison Island aftermath, but from here on out, they're just getting a bigger and a bigger focus. The party itself is also bigger now, but it's also complete, and they all get a moment to reflect on whatever has happened or is currently happening, and it's great. And where, before Prison Island, I said that the game was slowly getting better and slowly grabbing my interest again, but mostly in retrospect, here I feel like I actually started to enjoy the majority of the story. Most of my criticisms were basically gone for having character moments interweaved with the world building, action, plot and lore. The more we find out about the world, the more I want to know about it as well, so the main plot was only getting more and more interesting. The only real issue I guess that I still had was the pacing in some moments, but that was a very small complaint compared to all of the good stuff that was going on. And this is what I meant with the game, slowly but surely climbing up and up to reach an honestly incredible ending. But we're not there yet. To get back on track, Right after the fortress sequence, we have the beach scene that I already mentioned. All the characters here are basically split up into small groups and they're lost on the beach of Mykonos and they're trying to get together again, which is a perfect moment for all of them to just kind of reflect on what's been happening and to reflect on their inner feelings and thoughts. We finally get another Rhine scene after all these hours, and it's really nice to see beyond the idiot best friend personality again, to see that he's still trying to be there for everyone, but he's kinda scared since everyone is getting so much stronger and he's scared to be left behind. I wish we saw this more often, as I do really like this about him, but we're seeing it now, and later on there are a few more scenes showcasing this as well, which is nice. We also get this other scene with Dunban, Melia and Ricky, where Melia is obviously physically exhausted, but she refuses to admit it and wants to keep going on, which then Ricky notices and he forces the group to take a break and rest, taking the blame on him instead, acting like he's the one that's tired, which is then followed by Melia instantly falling asleep, while Ricky is still energetically bouncing around. It's just a nice moment for every character involved, especially Ricky, since he's basically just a comedic relief character, but here we see another side of him, a side that we've seen every now and then, but I feel like this is probably one of his best moments. He genuinely cares about Melia and the rest of the group, and it doesn't feel out of character at all, since he does have like, I don't know how many children. And to no one's surprise, Melia was of course also really good in this scene. I don't think anyone was wondering that, but I'm gonna mention it anyway. But then there's also the scene of Shulk and Fiora, which is probably my favorite out of these. Not only was the way that Fiora came back really interesting, but as you might remember, Fiora was my favorite character from the beginning of the game. So I was really happy to have her back and to have more time with her. I was also just hoping that they'd build on the foundation that they laid out for her. And all of these scenes do a pretty good job at that, especially since we actually get a few scenes back to back focused on them. One on the beach itself, one later inside of the structure, and one on the way there. We see where Fiora's at both physically and mentally, and we see Shulk's reaction to all of this, further exploring their relationship after what happened in Colony 9. So even if it took them a while, the game is definitely starting to make me like a lot more characters, especially Shulk and Fiora. And since we're building towards the climax, we're also getting a lot more information about the Bionis and the Mykonos, their inhabitants, and all of that stuff. We're also starting the final war, I guess you could say, between these two worlds, and because of that, the Melia subplot of the High Entia is also starting to pay off here, since they're of course also involved in this war, together with Dixon and Alvis. And as I already said, I really love the conclusion of this game, so now that the story is actively building towards it, I was just genuinely starting to enjoy most of the story, where before it was just a moment here and there. And it keeps going strong as we're getting more reveals with Sansa and Lady Mayneth, but my favorite thing about all of these reveals and all of these plot points is that it's not just about these two worlds or about these two beings or gods, but it's also interweaved very closely with Fiora and Shulk's character. So I am very happy that they had a few spotlight moments right before all of this. With the beach or the factory, all of those moments that finally made me care about him. And now that we're getting these really interesting plot points that are closely connected to them as characters, was only making me more invested in what's going on here. And it was also just really important to have those character moments before all of these reveals, because I feel like otherwise you'd be at risk of having these characters become plot devices in a way, especially Fiora, since she only just came back into the story, while now they gave the characters a lot of extra depth in both their character and in their relationship. Shulk and Fiora definitely became some of my favorite characters thanks to this. Getting back on track with the story though, there's also this whole thing going on with Gadult coming back from Colony 6, which actually finally gives us a good Sharla and Rhine moment that's interweaved with the main plot. Even if I didn't care that much about their characters, I did appreciate the scene. But you know, Sharla, outside of a few lines of dialogue here and there, she hasn't really done anything since her introduction, and because of that, while I appreciated the scene for her character, I like the scene more so for Ryan. It's weird because the scene is very focused on Charla and Ryan is more of a secondary focus, but I just didn't care about her that much, and I feel like the game also never really tried to make me care about her. While for Ryan, this does line up with everything that we've gotten from him ever since chapter 1 and earlier on the beach and all of those moments. So I don't know, I liked the scene and I started to like these characters, or at least Ryan. Their character still isn't anywhere near Melia, Shulk or Fiora level, but at least they're getting another scene, which I did like. But moving on from that, this entire sequence also leads into some more Eggle stuff, some more Sansa stuff, and then there's also the whole Dixon reveal going on with his betrayal and his connection to Sansa. There is a lot here, and I'm not gonna talk about every single scene or every part of this section, but I did really like it. It was all really interesting, and I like how they're revealing the right amounts at all times. It's like how they did it with the Fiora stuff. They're still being cryptic about some stuff, like here it's with Shulk's or Alphys's role in all of this, but they're also not just hinting at stuff either, since we do get a lot more from Lady Maynard, Sansa, Egil, and of course Dixon. Dixon was a character that before this was kind of whatever. I felt like he was just kind of the cool uncle type, but this reveal was pretty cool and it did make me like him more. We also get a look at his backstory and how this connects to Shulk's backstory, adding on to what we knew before from their connected backstory and kind of just adding some more layers to it. We get a lot of lore here, but then afterwards everything also gets really chaotic again with the death of Melia's brother, because my girl hasn't suffered enough, I guess. But then after that chaotic moment and after that reveals, things do slow down again. And I think this is the last slower moment before the end, and I really like this part. We get a lot more from our characters, especially Shulk and Fiora. We also get a cool scene between Melia and Fiora, and we even get some more from Melia and her feelings for Shulk. It's just some good character stuff, which is just what I love. Plus, it was also focused on my now 3 favorite characters, so I don't really have anything bad to say about this part. But then Dixon shows up. Alphys tells Shulk that he should defy fate, because of course he does, it's a JRPG, and then I would say we reach the finale of the game. But first, there's this section where we wrap up Melia's plotline and we give her some closure with the death of her brother and all of that stuff. The pacing of that section being placed here is a little bit weird in my opinion. It felt like we were getting ready for the finale and then this kind of just got put in there, but it gives us another very good moment with Melia. It's just a very good sequence in general, so I don't really want to complain about it too much. And then after this we do get to the finale. We go back to Prison Island and the ending and the story here goes fucking crazy, and I'm here for it. First we fight Dixon, and because it's a JRPG, afterwards we fight God, Shulk then becomes God, and everything gets revealed here. Who or what Alphys is and how this world was created. We even get to see the creation of the world, and I fucking love this entire section. The world building throughout the game has been pretty incredible, and finding out all of this stuff now is really satisfying. As I said before, up until now they were only cryptically hinting at stuff, and now finally they revealed everything, and it was done really well. Finding out Shulk's role in all of this was genuinely fantastic. The game knew what it was doing in its final stretch, both character and plot-wise. I just don't have anything bad to say about this at all. I watched this ending section so many times, and I just really love it. Especially because this also doesn't come out of nowhere. We've always known that there was something up with Alphys or with Sansa or with Fiora after he came back. We know that this is kind of a strange world ever since the opening cutscene, and now in the end all of those plotlines come together beautifully. So as much as I've been saying that I've not really enjoyed a majority of the game, the plot really does pay off in the end. The very last cutscene is also just really nice. We get a slow kind of epilogue scene of all the characters rebuilding the world, recovering and reflecting on what's happening, also just hanging out in their new reality without gods, where the Mechons and the Homs are living side by side now. This scene also just focuses on the best characters. All of her party members are of course shown, but it's clear who the game puts the bigger focus on. We get one last scene with Melia as she talks to Fiora about her plans for the future and her appreciation for the journey, even if so much shit has happened. It's actually really nice to show how far the two of them have come. We then see Ricky, Charla and Ryan just goofing off. As I said, the game definitely chooses who to focus on for this final section, and besides her, Melia, Shulk and Fiora, the rest doesn't really get a spotlight. And then after just seeing them goofing off in the background, we get one last scene of Fiora and Shulk. It shows that Fiora got her Hom's body back, and the two of them are just talking, because their relationship is of course what kicked off this whole thing, so it's nice to end the game on that same note. Just like the Fiora and Melia conversation, this was just a really nice and cute scene. But now that I've basically covered all of the story, that then brings me to my final point, because as I've been saying and as you've just heard, I love the ending, but that ultimately leaves me a bit sad. I watched the ending many times now, and I'm always left with the same feeling. When I had the controller in my hands as I watched the ending for the first time, or as I watched the ending on my multiple rewatches of the entire story for this video, I always have the same thought when credits roll, being, damn, Xenoblade is really fucking good. But then I think about it for a second, and I think about all the problems that I've had with this game. I beat it in around 50-55 hours, and I only really enjoyed maybe 7 to 8 of them, 10 at most. So I can't really say that I think Xenoblade is a really fucking good game, or that it's incredible. I think the ending is phenomenal. I think the ending is 10 out of 10. I think it has a really strong start, but most of what was in between that was just so nothing to me. It wasn't memorable, it wasn't enjoyable, I wasn't interested. The characters didn't connect with me and I didn't enjoy playing through it at all. It was just a drag that had an interesting moment here and there at best. So ultimately, as much as I adore the ending, as much as I love a lot of the concepts, as much as I like the world and a select few characters, I'm just left feeling disappointed. And it's honestly so annoying. If I didn't like the opening or the ending section, if I didn't like those concepts or this world or those few characters, this would be so much easier, because then I could just be like, nah, I played the game, I didn't like it, it's not for me, and I would be able to move on. But there were things here that I loved, like Melia and the ending, and some of the small ways that they've been building up this ending since the very beginning, that it makes me so disappointed in the parts that didn't connect with me, with all the weird pacing issues and the missed opportunity with the characters. The characters definitely being the main thing, because I do think that if the game was more character driven, if it had more character moments, if the game just put a bigger focus on them and the group, I would have probably liked the game a lot more, because then even if I didn't care about the current objective, or even if we were in a slower section, I would still be invested because of them. Because if you look at a game like Tales of Arise or Persona 5, those games are constantly showing off its characters, be it in side content while exploring the world or in the main story, there are constant character moments. So even when the story had a slower moment, I cared and I was invested because I cared about the characters. I was invested in every single hour of my 100 hours Persona 5 playthrough because I loved those characters. And just like with any of my favorite JRPGs, I wanted to spend more time with them after beating the game. And I just wish that Xenoblade could have done something similar. Maybe not to the same extent, because that's expecting a lot. Only really special games can achieve that feeling, but I would have liked it if I at least cared about half of the main party. But with that, I made my peace with the story and characters. I hope that I was able to bring my point across. So let's finally move on from this and talk about the gameplay. I will be touching on the story a little bit in those sections as well though, since it's all one package of course, and one does influence the other, but I said most of what I have to say about the story now. So let's talk about the gameplay. And this section should be a lot shorter since I have a lot less to say about this part of the game, because while I do think that the gameplay was enjoyable to a certain extent, I didn't enjoy playing through it that much. This was mostly because of personal preferences and some issues that I have with the game's structure. But let's take it one by one, and let's talk about the combat first. I do have some genuine gripes with it that I will be talking about, but as I said, most of the reasons boil down to personal preference. Because in the combat here, you basically just stand next to the enemy, you have Shulk auto attack, and you press the skill button whenever your cooldown is ready. It's actually very MMO-like, and while there is absolutely nothing wrong with that, it has a lot of depth in the skills that you want to use for everyone. Like, I've seen some pretty funny builds with Naked Dunban, but I personally just didn't vibe with it. I do feel like the combat will be better in future games, or that I'll like it more in future games, because the combat also felt very aged. It wasn't that satisfying or that smooth to play. Instead, it felt a bit slow and a bit sluggish, but that's not really a criticism. The original Xenoblade is pretty old, and this is just a remaster. I find it hard to shit on the game just because it's a bit older. I don't know how much they changed the gameplay for this remaster, but I feel like I'll just like the newer titles more because they were made for more modern consoles, so it'll probably play a lot smoother. It's just a product of its time. But while I did have my problems with it, I definitely didn't hate it. In the first half of the game, I didn't even mind it. Like, yeah, it wasn't my favorite combat system, but it was fine. It was good enough, especially because they keep introducing new skills, which keeps it from getting boring. But that's only for the first half of the game, because around the halfway point, I'd say, maybe a bit further, you have all the skills that the game has to offer, and then they just stop introducing new things. So after this, playing the game quickly became very one-note to me and a little bit of a drag. At least the downfall of the gameplay, so to say, synced up nicely with the point where I started to enjoy the story more, so I didn't really mind it that much. However, there was something that I did really love in the combat, namely the fact that it incorporates certain story elements, being Shulk's visions. You would just be fighting an enemy and suddenly you see that it's gonna deliver a massive attack on Orion in the next 15 seconds through a vision. A timer would then start and you have time to counteract this somehow. You can heal him, you can shield him so he can tank it, you can try to stun the enemy or drag aggro to someone else, or maybe you can just try to kill the enemy within that time. It's a pretty cool mechanic and it made the combat a lot more interesting. I love games in general that play around with time or time travel, so having visions of the future that you could prepare for mid-battle was an awesome concept. It wasn't perfect though, since the novelty of it does wear off after a while, and since it triggers randomly, it can be annoying sometimes. I'm thinking about those random fights in the open world where you can literally start a fight and be done with it in a few seconds, but if the vision triggers during a fight like that, it's kind of annoying, because the game is just like, watch out, this guy's gonna kill you in 30 seconds! But as soon as the vision ends, you just one-shot the enemy, because you literally just got into the encounter and he's not that hard. But I'll let it slide because that's kind of a nitpick and it's a really cool mechanic, so I'll take it with its flaws. But as I said earlier, I do have some genuine gripes with the combat outside of personal preference or age, being the fact that you can't switch characters during battle, which is weird because you can swap them outside of battle, you can control everyone, you just can't swap during combat. And it's pretty annoying during fights where you're fighting characters from Bionis, and Shulk is literally useless in those fights, since he can't use the Monado against them. Thankfully though, this only happens 2 or 3 times, but it's so weird the game puts you in a combat scenario where you literally can't do anything at all. Every single time it happens, I was thinking like, oh, this is one of those fights that are scripted and you just have to lose in order to progress the story. But no. Shulk just can't do anything, and you just have to stand around until your party members deal with them. It's strange because it can easily be fixed by showing you the main menu right before the encounter, or I guess they could just default switch you to another character in your active party since they usually have pretty good equipment. But yeah, I don't know, it's just a bit strange. And this reliance on the party members also carries over in some other parts of the combat, like when you're trying to go for a topple, because some enemies can cannot be damaged unless they're toppled, but to do that you need Shulk to use a break attack, and then the AI of the party members need to do a topple follow-up attack. It works in chain attacks because you can then choose what every party member does and in which order, but besides that it's pretty annoying when you keep breaking the enemy only for Ryan to do every possible attack besides for the one that you need him to do. If you could just switch characters during a fight, this problem would not be a thing, but I do think that they added this to Xenoblade 3. I'm not sure about 2, but I'm glad that they added it to the franchise at some point, so I'm not going to be complaining about it too much. But it is my experience with Xenoblade 1. It is a problem that I ran into, so I wanted to mention it anyway. But yeah, that was basically everything that I had to say about the combat. I have some problems with it, but overall, I would say it's fine. I can't really judge it too hard for not being my thing or for being a bit older. It has its problems, but it was still enjoyable, I'd say. But what I do have some more criticisms for is the entire structure of the game. With that, I mean the worlds, the quests, and the side quests. And my thoughts on this actually ties into what I talked about earlier as well during the story section, being that I actually enjoyed rewatching the cutscenes of this game a lot more than actually playing through the game, and my reason for that should become clear as I talk about this. My main problem here is that the world is just way too big and there's nothing to justify it being that big. Don't get me wrong, there is side content, but the subquests are all just pretty bad. Or maybe I just got unlucky and I only did bad ones, but I doubt it. Because in the first chapters, I actually did a lot of them. I spent a surprising amount of time in that first town doing side quests, but I didn't have fun with any of them. Most of them were just fetch quests and they didn't even bother naming them, because the quests all had generic names like Monster Quest 1, 2, or 3, or Item Quest 4, 5, or 6. And because the world is so big, it takes you really long to do these side quests as well. In other games, I don't like fetch quests, but I also don't mind them that much. They're not the best side content, but they're just a quick way to get some XP, some money, and they're often just an excuse to explore the world and to have some more combat opportunities. But here, the world is massive and it's pretty empty, so doing a fetch quest basically just means running in one direction for 5 minutes, pick up 1 or 2 items, kill 1 or 2 monsters, and then run back for 5 minutes, with literally nothing to do on the way there or back, besides for killing some more monsters. And keep in mind that I wasn't the biggest fan of the combat system, so while I was still doing the quests in the first area, as soon as I left Colony 9 I started doing less and less of them. Not only because I was just not having the best time with them, but also because the areas got so much bigger as you progressed the game, meaning that to walk to or from the item just got so much longer as well. At least the game has an auto-run button, but I feel like if you need an auto-run button, that's already a problem. If the world has interesting things going on, why would you need an auto button? Wouldn't you want the player to explore this world by themselves, instead of just making the player press one button that makes Shulk walk forwards automatically? Because I play a lot of open world games, it's actually one of my favorite genres. I love games like Red Dead or Spider-Man, or if you're sticking with Nintendo, I really like both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. And even if the side quests in all of those games that I just mentioned might not be the best, I didn't mind doing them because the world was interesting to explore, so I would just find the item or kill the monster and complete those quests naturally as I was exploring the world, or while I was doing the main story. While here, I didn't really find anything worth exploring, besides for just looking at the pretty scenery. But that pretty scenery is then also just an empty space with enemies placed into it. So if I were to do a side quest, I would always have to go out of my way to do them, and both the rewards and the act of just doing them wasn't really worth it in my opinion, as I just didn't enjoy it. But the emptiness of the world and the lackluster side content, or just the structure of all of this, made me think that this game maybe isn't just a normal open world game like any other JRPG, or just regular open world games. Like, yeah, on paper, or if you would look at the game, it's an open world game. It has an open world, but it's utilized more as a setting or as a space for the main missions to take place in. So you basically progress through the game as if it was a linear experience. But then again, again, it's all taking place within this massive open space, and all of the side content is kinda just there to fill the void, which is why it's not the most engaging type of content. And this does give the game a bigger scale, and it fits with the context of Shulk going on this journey, but at the same time it makes playing through it such a drag, since you're often just running from point A to B. I don't know if that was what they were going for or not, but since I just didn't find anything interesting to do in the world outside of the main quests, that's the feeling that I got from it. And while there's nothing wrong with structuring your game like that, you can use an open world purely as a setting for your main quests. But that doesn't mean that the world has to be this big. If they just gave us more ways to interact with the world, like maybe give us a sprint or a vehicle, that would already make for a massive improvement, because on top of just having to walk everywhere, Shulk also walks pretty fucking slowly for the distance that he's covering. And movement speed might sound like a nitpick, but in my opinion it is pretty important, especially in games with a large world like this. If you want your world to be really big, then you also need a faster way of traversing through it. Like the fields in Final Fantasy 16, for example, are really big, and they might also be pretty empty with not really many ways of interacting with the world, but that's why they gave you the Chocobo. And before you go to the comment section to tell me that there is a quick travel function, I know that there is a quick travel function, but that's only for when you're going to areas that you previously visited. So when visiting a new area, like Sword Valley for the first time, you just have to walk through it. Now, I do get that originally this was a 3DS game, so it was probably extremely impressive for a system like that, but I honestly just wish that the world was a lot smaller or had more ways of interacting with it or more ways to move through it, because now it's just a drag to go anywhere at all. So much so that even the main story was affected by it, because remember earlier what I said about the main story kind of having small filler quests, or small quests that felt like sidetracks to stretch out the game? Yeah, those were made a lot worse just because the world is this big. Like that section in the capital where you're watching these interesting cutscenes with Alvis, but then you're interrupted by a fetch quest, so you gotta go there first and do all of that. Or when you wanna unlock Prison Island, but the game goes, wait, you can't just do that. The island is sealed and you need to activate these 3 towers, and then you will have access to Prison Island. You're this close to reaching Prison Island, a moment that's been hyped up so much thanks to the visions, a moment that was really excited to get to, both because of the visions and because a lot of my friends were saying that that's where the game gets good. But instead of just going there, you need to do this fetch main quest that literally just has you run across this massive open world to press 3 buttons. And the game does this pretty regularly, which is why it also just really bothered me that the world was this big. If I just had to walk through the world to get from quest A to quest B, it would be annoying, but it wouldn't be that bad. But if it's during the quests as well, that the game actively takes you out of the story so you can just walk around this empty world, which is basically all that you're doing anyway, it gets really annoying. The only exceptions to this really being the more linear missions, such as Melia's Trial or any of the dungeons, and those are then also the parts of the games that I enjoyed the most. And this entire thing with the world and mission structure is 100% without a doubt the thing that bothered me the most about this game, if we're talking gameplay and game design wise. It just made everything such a drag, and I really hope that the future games improve on this. They can do it in a lot of ways, make the world smaller, add more open world content, improve the side quests, improve the structure of the main quest, give me a vehicle or a faster sprint, or just any other way to interact with stuff. I don't care as long as they change something about this. But there is one piece of side content that I've purposefully not talked about yet. Outside of the fetch quests, there is one singular activity, which, in theory, could fix basically all of my problems with this game, or at least most of them, and I'm not even joking. I'm talking about the Hearts-to-Heart events. These are marked locations on the map, and if you run up to them, you can watch a scene between 2 party members, and they can literally be anything. From Ricky talking to Sharla, or Shulk talking to Melia. So you can probably already see why, in theory, this would fix a lot of my problems. Not only are there more character interactions, but you're also placed in the open world, so you can run into them while doing these main story fetch quests. But and this is why it didn't actually fix all my problems, or any of them for that matter. These are all locked behind the affinity system, and I have no idea why they made it so hard to access these events, because I'm pretty sure that I could count the heart-to-heart that I've seen on one hand. Because every single time that I ran into one of them, I would go there, try to access it, only for the game to tell me that I could not view it yet. Even if I was in late game and I would fast travel back to the previous heart-to-hearts that I found, they were still locked, which really annoyed me, because I wanted to see these events, I wanted to see more of these characters, I kind of wanted to play the game more because I was getting underleveled and I needed that little bit of motivation to do side quests, but I just couldn't access them because they were locked, and that quickly took away that little bit of motivation that I had left. Now, it is partly my fault because I chose to not really engage with the affinity system. You gain affinity by using characters in battle or by giving them gifts, so I guess I could have grinded out battles while swapping through my party members, or I guess I could have used a gift guide and grinded those items, but I didn't care enough. My problems with the world and the side content basically made me beeline the story already, so I really didn't feel like grinding those items or doing more of those quests just to get the affinity levels up, just to have a chance of maybe getting a good heart-to-heart. Especially because I just didn't like the combat that much. But even then, I feel like locking these heart-to-hearts is a bit useless. Why not just let them unlock as you progress through the story instead? I really don't get why they did that, but at least I think the devs agree with me on this. Because they fixed it in the after-story epilogue Future Connected, but I'll come back to that in a second when I talk about Future Connected. First though, to end this section, I want to mention something positive again, because while talking about the world, I can't not mention the looks of the environment. The world is genuinely fucking gorgeous. The graphics might not be anything too fancy, but that doesn't really matter if the art direction is there. I especially like how each area feels very distinct from one another, from the Bionis Fields to the Magna Forest to the capital to the places on the Mechonus. The world is just really nice to look at. Exploring it might have been a drag, but every single time that I entered a new area, I would actually stand still for a second and slowly pan the camera around to look at all the scenery. Before pointing Shulk in the right direction, of course, and pressing the auto-run button. But yeah, I don't care if you're a fan of this game or not, I don't care if you have agreed with any of the points that I've said so far, but I think we can all agree on the fact that this game just has some gorgeous environments. But that is then basically everything that I wanted to say about the main game of Xenoblade Chronicles. But the Definitive Edition also comes with another thing, being future connected. And my experience with this epilogue or side story was actually mostly positive. Future Connected, as I just mentioned, is an epilogue to the main story of Xenoblade, taking place 1 year after the events, and the plot starts with Alchemov, the capital where Melia is from, being found again during the rebuilding of the world. Because, of course, after the ending of Xenoblade, Shulk became a god, Shulk completely reshaped the world, so it's a universe without gods, and the world was also just completely restructured, and the people are just rebuilding their homes now, with some locations being lost in the process. Not lost as in they're gone, but lost as in, I guess Shulk forgot where he put them. I don't know. That was a dumb joke. But with the capital being found again, it's only natural that Melia would set out to investigate. But she's not doing this alone, being joined by Shulk and 2 new characters, the Noppon Kino and Nene. Arriving in the capital, however, they found out that a certain entity called the Fog King has basically taken over, and it's driven out its people. So the goal of the story is basically to defeat the Fog King and get back the capital. And I really like this side story, or epilogue story. Because while it has this entire plot about the Fog King and the Telefia and the High Entia, in the end it's extremely character driven. The main focus of this epilogue is basically just Melia's character, her reflecting on the events of the main story, how that shaped her and how she's applying what she learned to the new situation that she's in now, in which she also learns a lot of new things to ultimately show that she's grown so much as a character and that she's ready, or that she's at least on the right path to become a great ruler of the High into you. Of course, Shulk is also here and their dynamic is really nice. They have some very good conversations, and while their relationship isn't romantic or anything like that, you can see how close they are to each other and how much respect that they have for each other. Shulk's role here is basically just to support Melia though, but I feel like that's fine. He had his entire arc in the main game, he still has some very great moments here, but ultimately he's here to fight and to support Melia. I do really like his trip though. Both Melia and Shulk got new outfits and I really like how both of them look. I just really wanted to mention it and I couldn't really see where else to fit it in. And the two new characters in Kino and Nene are also surprisingly entertaining. They're both Ricky's kids, even if Kino is adopted, and their brother and sister dynamic is really fun. I even enjoyed them more than Ricky, both of them having their small arc, and they also just bounce off of each other really well. This party in general just bounces off of each other really well, and because Future Connected is so character driven, there are a lot of character moments throughout. Basically after every single noteworthy event, or even when the party is just traveling from point A to B, they would have these conversations about what's on their mind or about what's happening in the story, which is something that I really missed in the main game, so I'm glad that it's happening a lot more here. Melia and Shulk were already fantastic characters with a believable friendship, but this story only gave them and their relationship so much more depth, while also doing a really good job at introducing Kino and Nene, both having some genuinely good moments while also joking around a lot, basically just taking the role of Ricky but better. And while we're talking about the character moments, Future Connected also changed the hearts to hearts, as I mentioned earlier, and you can unlock them as you're playing through the story, which is exactly what I wanted. And besides your reworking heart to hearts, they also added another thing in the way of side content, being the Ponspector quests. And while these aren't anything special from a gameplay point of view, I actually felt more enticed to do these because they have a pretty good reward as they strengthen your new ultimate attack thing called a Union attack. In these attacks you're joined by the Ponspectors that you helped out in these side quests, so the more of those side quests that you do, the more Ponspectors will join you, which of course makes the attack stronger. Now, I still didn't do that many of them just because, as I said earlier, I'm not the biggest fan of the combat system in this game, but I did do quite a few just because strengthening that Union attack seemed very useful. Plus, the world was also a lot smaller for the side story and a lot more streamlined, so I kinda ran into these quests and I was kind of completing them naturally while progressing the main story or while going to some heart-to-hearts. I just really liked how this DLC was structured. It's not a DLC, it's an epilogue story that came with the game, but it's kind of structured like a DLC, you know? So I might just call it DLC from now on, even though I'm almost at the end of this section. Outside of the character stuff and the gameplay improvements, I also really liked the story itself. Most of the new and returning characters were pretty interesting, it didn't have that much sidetracking at all, and it just had some great moments throughout, both character and plot-wise. Maybe there wasn't anything that completely blew me away, maybe it didn't reach the peaks that the main game reached, but it also did not have any of the lows that I experienced with the main game. It was just entertaining throughout, which is also why I don't really feel the need to go into detail here and talk about specific scenes. I do feel like a lot of the story was there to set up future Xenoblade games, especially the stuff near the end with the rifts and the Fog King, but it was still pretty enjoyable to play through, and it did a lot more than setting stuff up. It was just a genuinely good story in and of itself. Or at least I'm assuming that those plot points will be brought back, or I'm assuming that those plot points were there for future titles. I honestly have no idea, but it's called Future Connected. So I'm just gonna make a really wild guess here and say that this connects to the future. And because they addressed so many of my problems with the main game in this epilogue, it actually made me more excited for the future titles. Stuff like the story being more character driven, the world being more streamlined, and having optional content that didn't only feel more worthwhile, but also more accessible in the way of the heart-to-hearts. This was just a really nice way to end the experience that I had with this game, in my opinion. Not only did we get the absolutely incredible ending of the main story, but we also got this really nice, enjoyable and solid epilogue with two of my favorite characters. while also introducing 2 new characters that I actually liked more than most of the main game's party. And with that, I feel like I said everything that was on my mind about Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. Hopefully I didn't come across too negatively, because in the end I do not hate the game at all. Even if I was disappointed with many aspects of it, I just think that the game is okay, I guess. I don't know, I wish I was more positive about this game, since I do really like some aspects, like the story of the world, the beginning and the ending of the game, future connected, Shulk, Melia and Fiora, but playing this game was just not that good of an experience for me. From the slow combats that just stops introducing new things midway through, to the constant walking from A to B in this massive empty world, the uninspired fetch quests that were just every single side quest that I found, and then the main quests that just felt like those side quests. I don't know. It's hard to compress all of those thoughts into a small conclusion, but you did just watch this entire video, so hopefully you see where I'm coming from when I say that the game did disappoint me in the end. And hopefully this video didn't anger the Xenoblade community too much. But yeah, next up, I'm of course playing Xenoblade Chronicles 2. There's a very big chance that I already started it by the time that this video comes out, and I'm actually super excited for it. It might be a bit weird since I didn't exactly love the first game, but from what I've heard, I do think that I'll like 2 more. Mostly because it seems to be extremely character driven compared to the first game, which was more focused on the world building and the plot itself. I don't know, I don't see that many people talking about the characters of Xenoblade 1, while I do constantly see fan art of the characters from 2 and of course 3, so I'm guessing that those games will put a bigger focus on their characters. Also, this might be really dumb, but looking at the cover arts of both games, Xenoblade 1 extremely focused on the plot and the world, so the cover is just the Monado and the world, while Xenoblade 2 and 3 has the cast front and center. This might not mean anything, but maybe it does. I've also heard a lot of weird things about Xenoblade 2 though, but in general I am pretty excited. I'm not super hyped because of the questionable stuff I've seen and heard, like apparently there's a gacha system in there, but we'll see. If I had to make a prediction right now though, I will probably like 2 more than 1, but in the end, after finishing all of the games, I think and I hope that 3 will be my favorite. But that's 3. First I gotta play 2 and then Torna, and I think I'll have a good time with those. But we'll see how right or wrong that is in my next Xenoblade video, which will probably be out sometime next year in 2024. If you want smaller updates on my playthrough though, be sure to follow me on Twitter or X. I'm always posting over there about the games that I'm playing and posting my thoughts and impressions as I make progress. So if you like this video, I feel like you'll like my account over there as well. And if you like this video, be sure to leave a like and a comment. It seriously helps me out, and be sure to subscribe if you want more, especially if you don't want to miss my Xenoblade 2 and 3 video. I have no idea when they'll be out. Long videos like this take a while, but they will release one day. But with that, I'm gonna end this video here. I hope you all enjoyed it, and hopefully I'll see you all again soon.